In example 6, we're talking about vertical translations or vertical shift, which is the average of the maximum and minimum values of the function. The parent functions of y equals sine x and y equals cosine x oscillate about the x-axis. After a vertical shift, a new horizontal axis known as the midline becomes the reference line or equilibrium point for which the graph oscillates. For example, the midline of y equals sine x plus 1 is shown over to the right. So if you take a look right here, normally our graph oscillates with the x-axis, but since we have this plus 1, we've shifted our graph up 1, which also shifts that midline up 1. In general, the midline for the graphs of sine and cosine is y equals d. If d is positive, the graph is going to move up, and if d is negative, the graph moves down. Let's look at the problem below. State the amplitude, period, phase shift, and vertical shift of g of x equals 1 plus 3 sine of x plus 2 pi, and describe how g of x and f of x are related. So the first thing, let's label our a, b, c, and d. So our a value, which is going to help us with the amplitude, is the number in front of our sine or cosine function that's being multiplied. So that's the 3. So our amplitude, or a, is 3. Our b value is the number on the inside of the function next to x. So our b value at this point is just a 1. Our c value is what's being added or subtracted inside of our function, which is 2 pi. And our d value is the number on the outside of our function that we're adding or subtracting to our function, which is 1. Oops. Next, what we can do is we can find what we need, starting with the amplitude. Since a is 3 and amplitude is the absolute value of a, we know the amplitude is just 3. The period is 2 pi divided by b. So since b is 1, we have 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. And then our phase shift is the opposite of c divided by b. Since c is a positive 2 pi, we are going to use a negative 2 pi divided by our b value, which is 1, giving us a phase shift of negative 2 pi. And our vertical shift is the d value, which is just 1. So how are we moving, or how are we changing this graph? Well, the amplitude is 3, so that tells us that we are going to stretch vertically by a factor of 3. Our period is still 2 pi, which is the original period of our graph, so that hasn't changed. Our phase shift is negative 2 pi, so that tells us that we will be going to the left by 2 pi. And our vertical shift of a positive 1 tells us that we will move our graph up 1. Next, I'd like you to try this. So go ahead and pause it and unpause it when you're ready to check your answer. If you did this correctly, you should have gotten an amplitude of 2, a period which is just 2 pi. Your phase shift, there is none. And the vertical shift is just 1. So that tells us that we stretched vertically by a factor of 1. By a factor of 2. Our period is still 2 pi, so that hasn't changed. There's no phase shift, so we're not going left or right. And a vertical shift of 1, and it's positive, tells us that we're going to go up 1. If you have questions, let me know.